In February of this year, a woman named Carol stopped me outside the constituency office in Great Yarmouth. She was not there for an appointment. She had not written ahead. She had simply seen my car and decided that this was her moment. She was 63 years old. She had worked as a community nurse for 31 years. She had voted Conservative in every general election since 1983. And she stood on that pavement in the February cold and said to me, with a steadiness that I found more moving than any speech I have heard in the House of Commons, I do not know who to vote for anymore. I do not know if any of you are actually on our side. I did not have a quick answer for Carol. I do not believe in quick answers, but I made her a promise. Not the kind of promise that politicians make on doorsteps and forget before the car door closes. The kind that you make when someone has said something true enough and serious enough that it would be a form of cowardice not to respond to it honestly. The promise was this, that everything I am building with Restore Britain, every candidate we recruit, every policy we develop, every argument we make is built around one answer to the question she was really asking. The question underneath the question, not who to vote for, but whether the system can still produce someone worth voting for. My answer is yes. This is why. Subscribe if you believe that British politics can be something other than what it currently is. That there is a version of this country, not a nostalgic fantasy, not a flag-waving distraction, but a practical, serious, deliverable version where the institutions work, where the people who run them are accountable for the results, and where Carol from Great Yarmouth does not have to stand on a pavement in February and wonder whether any of it is for her. Let me be clear about what Restore Britain is not, because in politics, as in most things, the negatives often tell you more than the positives. It is not Reform UK with better branding. The people who built Reform UK, and I was among them for a time, built something that had genuine energy and genuine grievance at its core, and then subordinated both of those things to the management of one man's political career. That is not a movement. That is a vehicle. And the British people, who are more perceptive about these things than the political class gives them credit for, have begun to notice the difference. It is not the Conservative Party rebooted. The Conservative Party had 50 years of electoral dominance, genuine intellectual tradition, and a record of delivering when it chose to serious, lasting reform. It also had 14 years of government that ended in a condition of such comprehensive failure that the party lost more than 200 seats in a single night. The institutional failure that produced that result did not disappear when the result was declared. It is structural. It will not be fixed by a new leader or a sharper communications team, and it is not a protest movement. This is perhaps the distinction that matters most. Britain has no shortage of political anger. Anger is easy. Anger is cheap. Anger generates YouTube views and social media engagement and the warm feeling of collective outrage. It does not fix the NHS. It does not build houses. It does not retrain the workforce or reform the planning system or renegotiate the energy contracts that are currently costing British families more than they can afford. Anger without a program is just noise with better lighting. Restore Britain is a program, a serious one, and that is what the rest of this needs to be about. Start with housing, because nothing else, not immigration, not energy, not NHS waiting lists, can be properly addressed without first understanding that Britain's failure to build enough homes is the load-bearing failure underneath almost every other crisis that ordinary families are currently living through. We are building approximately 200,000 homes per year in England. The government's own target, the number required simply to keep pace with household formation, let alone to address the backlog, is 300,000. That gap, 100,000 homes per year, has been accumulating for over a decade. It represents millions of people who cannot access the housing they need at a price they can afford in the places where the jobs are. It represents young people living with parents into their 30s. It represents key workers, the nurses, the teachers, the paramedics, priced out of the communities they serve. It represents the impossible arithmetic of a rental market, where average rents in London now consume more than 40% of the median take-home wage. Restore Britain's position on housing is straightforward and it is non-negotiable. Reform the planning system. Give local authorities genuine powers and genuine resources to build. End the veto that a small number of organised objectors currently exercise over developments that the majority of local people want and need. Stop treating housing targets as aspirational and start treating them as the legal minimum they should be. This will not be popular with every voter. Some of the people who vote for parties like ours own houses and have an economic interest in scarcity. Making that argument, honestly telling people that the system which has benefited property owners for 20 years has simultaneously been failing their children and their grandchildren is the kind of thing that political parties routinely choose not to do. Restore Britain is choosing to do it because the alternative is to keep producing policies that are designed to win focus groups rather than to fix problems. Now let us talk about the NHS, because this is the issue on which the political conversation in Britain is, in my view, the most systematically dishonest. The National Health Service is not failing because it is underfunded in absolute terms. NHS spending in England has increased in real terms in most years over the past 2 decades. The NHS is failing, and it is failing, whatever the government's preferred language about pressures and challenges, because the relationship between what goes in and what comes out has broken down in ways that more money alone will not fix. Productivity in the NHS, measured by the number of treatments and procedures delivered per pound of input, has declined significantly since 2019. The waiting list for elective treatment in England currently stands at over 7 million people. The number of people waiting more than a year for treatment that their clinician has judged necessary, not optional, necessary, runs into the hundreds of thousands. I have visited hospitals. I have spoken to consultants, to nurses, to porters, to administrators. What they describe is not a workforce that is lazy or uncommitted or resistant to improvement. It is a workforce that is operating inside a management and procurement and accountability structure that was designed for a different era and has not been reformed, because reforming it is genuinely difficult and politically costly and requires the kind of sustained, unglamorous, non-headline generating work that modern political culture has almost entirely lost the appetite for. Restore Britain's health policy begins not with a spending commitment, but with a structural one: independent clinical governance, genuine accountability for management performance, a procurement system that stops paying 4 times the market rate for agency staff because the workforce planning that would avoid that dependency has not been done. These are not radical ideas. They are the ideas that every serious health economist in the country has been advancing for years, and that every government has noted, praised, and then quietly set aside when the implementation proved harder than the announcement. On immigration, the honest position is the one that almost no one in mainstream politics will currently state plainly. So let me state it. Britain has been a successful country of immigration for centuries. That history is real, and it is something to be proud of. The contribution of people who came to this country and built lives and businesses and institutions and communities here is not a talking point. It is a fact that is woven into the fabric of what Britain actually is. The problem is not immigration. The problem is the combination of volume, speed, and dishonesty. The problem is a system that has been running at a scale that the country's housing stock, its public services, and its integration infrastructure cannot absorb without serious strain, while the people responsible for that system have consistently told the public that the strain is either imaginary or inevitable or both. Restore Britain's position is controlled, managed, needs-based immigration, not a closed door, a functioning door with a frame and a hinge and someone responsible for operating it. The number of people who come should be determined by what the country can accommodate and what the economy genuinely requires, not by the administrative backlogs and legal complexities that have allowed a situation to develop in which the government does not know with any precision how many people are in the country or what their circumstances are. This is not an extreme position. It is the position that the vast majority of British people of all backgrounds and all voting histories hold. The fact that it has not been delivered by any government in recent memory is not evidence that it is impossible. It is evidence of political failure, and political failure is something that can be corrected. Here is what separates a movement from a party, and this distinction matters more than anything else in understanding what Restore Britain is trying to be. A party asks, what do we need to say to win the next election? A movement asks, what does the country actually need, and how do we build the coalition of people willing to fight for it? Those two questions produce different answers on almost every issue. On housing, a party calculates the ratio of homeowners to renters in its target seats and calibrates its policy accordingly. A movement looks at what the housing crisis is doing to the life chances of an entire generation and decides that the calculation is not primarily electoral. On immigration, a party focuses on the language, the framing that will hold together the maximum number of voters in the maximum number of constituencies. A movement focuses on the policy, what actually needs to change in the system, regardless of whether naming it clearly costs votes in places where the mood is different. On the NHS, a party announces a waiting list target and a funding commitment and moves on to the next press release. A movement sits with the structural problem, develops a serious answer, and defends that answer in detail against the inevitable accusation that it is somehow an attack on a beloved institution rather than an attempt to make it work. Restore. Britain is choosing to be a movement. That choice has costs. It means saying things that are unpopular with some of the people whose votes we need. It means developing policy in public, in detail, where it can be scrutinized and criticized rather than kept vague until after the election. It means accepting that the short-term political logic of triangulation and managed message is less important than the long-term requirement to be the kind of political force that Carol from Great Yarmouth can actually trust. I want to speak directly to the people who have stopped believing, not the people who are angry. Anger is easy to reach. The people who have simply, quietly concluded that the system does not work for them and that nothing being offered by anyone with a platform and a rosette is going to change that. You are not wrong about the system. The system as it currently operates is not working for you. The evidence for that is everywhere, in your energy bills, in the wait for your appointment, in the house your children cannot afford, in the neighborhood that has changed faster than the services available to it. Your assessment is correct. But the conclusion that nothing can change, that the people who claim to want to fix it are all the same, that the only rational response is to disengage that conclusion, I want to argue, is wrong. Not because the political class deserves more trust than it has earned. It does not. but because disengagement is not neutral. It is a choice that leaves the field to the people who are already in it. And the people who are already in it have demonstrated comprehensively that they will not reform themselves while there is no serious pressure to do so. Restore Britain is that pressure, not a pressure of noise. There is enough noise. A pressure of seriousness, of detailed, costed, defensible policy, of candidates who have built things in their lives beyond political careers, of a willingness to say in public what everyone in Westminster is saying in private. Carol from Great Yarmouth asked me whether any of us are actually on her side. The only honest answer to that question is not a promise. It is a record. Records take time to build. Restore Britain is at the beginning of its, but the foundation on which it is being built, the decision to treat the British public as adults who can handle truth, who deserve specifics rather than slogans, and who are owed an account of what has gone wrong and a serious plan for making it right. That foundation is the thing I am most confident in, not because it is the easiest path. It is not, because it is the only one that leads somewhere worth going. Subscribe. Stay with this. The country we are trying to build is worth the argument it is going to take to build it.